The morning rain drummed against the windows of Sweet Dreams Bakery as Caris Monroe arranged freshly baked cupcakes in the display case. Each one was topped with a tiny sugar violet, her signature touch. She loved these early hours before the customers arrived, when she could think quietly and savor the scent of vanilla and cinnamon. I share new life stories here every day, and I'd really appreciate it if you hit subscribe and liked my video. Now, let's jump back into my story. I'm sure you'll love it if you keep listening till the end. The phone rang at 7:30 on the dot, which was unusual. Customers rarely called so early. "Hello, this is Caris." Caris rested the receiver on her shoulder while continuing to arrange the cupcakes. "Good morning, Ms. Monroe. I'm Barclay Quinn from the law firm Quinn, Owen & Associates. I'm calling about the estate of your godmother, Ms. Eris Holloway." Caris froze. Eris had passed away 3 weeks ago after a long battle with cancer. Caris had attended the funeral, but had since immersed herself in her work, trying not to think about the fact that she would never see the woman who had replaced her mother again. "Oh, yes, of course. What can I do for you?" "Ms. Holloway left you an inheritance. We need to meet for the paperwork. It's quite urgent given the nature of the assets." "Assets?" Caris interjected. "I don't understand. Eris never spoke of an inheritance." "Your godmother left you her restaurant, Ms. Monroe, the Legacy Crown." Caris's hand trembled, and one of the cupcakes fell to the floor. The Legacy Crown was the most prestigious restaurant in Atlanta. Politicians, celebrities, and business moguls dined there. Eris had built it up over 30 years, from a small cafe into a legend. "There must be some mistake," Caris murmured. "No mistake, Ms. Monroe. Ms. Holloway was very clear in her instructions. You were like a daughter to her. She thought you were the only person who could keep the restaurant's legacy alive." An hour later, Caris was sitting in Mr. Quinn's office, reviewing the papers that confirmed her ownership of the restaurant, valued at several $1,000,000. "Eris knew her diagnosis for over a year," the lawyer explained. "She planned everything carefully. In addition to the restaurant, there is a wine cellar, contracts with vendors, and special provisions for the staff. She left a letter with instructions." Caris took the envelope with trembling hands. On it was written, "To my dearest Caris," in Iris's familiar slanted handwriting. "Can I take this home now?" "Yes, of course, but we need to finalize the transfer of rights in the next few days. The restaurant can't be without management for long." Caris nodded, still unable to believe what was happening. She remembered the first time she walked into the Legacy Crown's kitchen as a 9-year-old girl. Her mother had worked there as a pastry chef until she died of pneumonia when Caris was 14. Eris had then taken her under her wing, paid for her education, and taught her everything she knew about baking. "You're special, Caris," Eris often told her. "You have hands that feel the dough and a heart that puts love into it." Lost in her memories, Caris barely noticed signing all the necessary papers. Everything she knew about the restaurant business she had learned from Eris, but running the Legacy Crown felt like an impossible task. When Caris arrived home, it was noon. She hoped to have time to read Eris's letter before Jarvis returned from work, but his car was already parked in the front yard of their small house in an Atlanta suburb. They had met 6 years ago at a charity dinner hosted by Jarvis's company. Caris was in charge of the desserts. Jarvis approached her with her lavender and honey cake in hand and told her he had never tasted anything like it in his life. A year later, they were married. "Caris, are you home?" Jarvis's voice sounded tense. She entered the living room and saw her husband sitting on the sofa with a glass of whiskey. 2 o'clock in the afternoon was unusual for that. "What's wrong? Why aren't you at work?" Jarvis looked up at her. He was an attractive man, tall, dark-haired, with regular facial features. But now, his usually confident expression had been replaced by something close to panic. "My mother called me. She says you inherited the Legacy Crown. Is it true?" Caris froze. She hadn't told anyone about the inheritance yet. How could he know? "So it's true." Jarvis took a gulp of his whiskey. "I mean, Caris, why didn't you tell me?" "I just got back from the lawyer. I was going to tell you tonight. Mom is friends with the wife of one of the waiters at the Crown. They're all in shock. Eris left the restaurant to you, not the chef or anyone in management." Caris felt herself blush. Of course, many people would be surprised. The owner of a small bakery suddenly getting one of the best restaurants in the city. "Eris was my godmother. We were very close." But a real restaurant. Jarvis stood up and started pacing the room. Do you have any idea what this means? This isn't a bakery with 3 tables and homemade cupcakes. It's a multi-million-dollar business. Caris clutched the envelope containing Eris's letter. She knew Jarvis was right. She had never managed a business of this magnitude, but Eris believed in her. I can do this. Eris taught me a lot. Caris, be realistic. Jarvis stopped in front of her. You make beautiful cakes, but what do you know about wine lists? About hiring staff? About balance sheets? I can learn, she replied quietly. Jarvis ran a hand through his hair, a gesture he made when he was particularly irritated. Mom said it was crazy, and I agree with her. At the mention of Tamsin Niles, Caris felt a familiar knot in her stomach. Her mother-in-law had never hidden her disappointment in her son's choice of a wife. She called Caris a baker, like it was a dirty word. What does this have to do with your mother? Caris asked, trying to hide her irritation. Jarvis looked away. She's coming over for dinner. She wants to discuss the situation. Discuss my inheritance, Jarvis? Our inheritance, he corrected. We're married, remember? The words hurt Caris. In 6 years of marriage, Jarvis had never shown any interest in her bakery. He had considered it a nice hobby that brought in a little money, and now that there was a valuable asset, suddenly everything was ours. That evening, the house filled with the smell of Tamsin's expensive perfume. As always, she entered without knocking, with her characteristic, "I'm here, darlings." Tall, with perfectly styled blonde hair and flawless makeup, Tamsin looked younger than her 60 years. Caris, honey. Tamsin brushed a quick kiss against her daughter-in-law's cheek. What incredible news. You must be in shock. Hello, Tamsin. Caris tried to smile. Yes, it was unexpected. I'm sure it was. Eris was always eccentric. Tamsin walked into the living room, tossing her coat into her son's arms. Remember, Jarvis, I told you how she refused to serve the state representative because he was 15 minutes late? She had quite a temper. Caris remained silent. Tamsin had never known Eris. She had heard all those stories from her friends in Atlanta's high society, to which she longed to belong. During the dinner, Caris had prepared in advance. Tamsin began to outline her takeover plan. I've spoken to Fielding, she said to her son, ignoring Caris. He thinks we need to move fast. The restaurant market is booming, especially for luxury places like the Legacy Crown. Who is Fielding? Caris asked. Oh, just my financial advisor, Tamsin dismissed. It doesn't matter. The important thing is we have 2 options. Either we sell the restaurant now while its reputation is still intact, or... She paused dramatically. I could take over. Caris nearly choked on her wine. Excuse me, what? Don't look at me like that, dear, Tamsin laughed. I wasn't always a housewife. I worked as an accountant for a large company before I married, and I always dreamed of owning my own restaurant. You never spoke of it, Caris commented. There was no reason to, Tamsin shrugged. But now that we have the opportunity, Jarvis, honey, say something. Jarvis looked uncertain, shifting his gaze from his mother to his wife. Mom has a point, Caris. She has experience in finance, and I could help with the technical side, the website, reservation systems, that sort of thing. And what about me? Caris asked quietly. Eris left the restaurant to me. Tamsin patted her hand. Honey, no one says you can't be involved. You can do the desserts. They're wonderful. But management, that's another matter. You need experience, contacts. Caris remembered the unopened letter from Eris in her purse. She should have read it sooner. I need to think about this, she said. It's a huge decision. Of course, dear. Tamsin smiled, but her eyes remained cold. But don't think too long. Business doesn't wait. After dinner, when Tamsin had left, Caris finally found time to open Eris's letter. She locked herself in the bathroom, the only place she could be alone. My dearest Caris, Eris wrote, if you are reading this, it means I'm gone. Don't be too sad. I lived a good life, and I am proud of what I created, especially proud of you. I am leaving you the legacy crown, not because I have no other heirs, but because you are the only person I trust with my creation. You have everything it needs: taste, intuition, hard work, and most importantly, heart. You love giving people not just food, but joy. It is a rare gift. I know you doubt yourself, but remember that I also started with a small cafe and no experience. All I had was passion and a willingness to learn. The restaurant staff will help you. Chef Bram Cassidy has been my right-hand man for 15 years. Manager Nita Price knows every process. They are waiting for you and are ready to support you. And one more important thing, not all documents and assets were handed over to you today. There are details only Barkley knows. Contact him if you run into any problems. Believe in yourself, as I believe in you. With love, Eris. Caris pressed the letter to her chest, feeling tears run down her cheeks. Eris believed in her, and she couldn't let her godmother down. When she came out of the bathroom, Jarvis was waiting for her in the bedroom with some papers in his hands. Here, he held out the papers. It's a power of attorney. Mom thinks it would be easier if you gave her the right to run the restaurant. Temporarily, of course. Caris looked at the papers, and then at her husband. She remembered how they met, how he admired her cakes, how he said she was the most talented woman he had ever met. When had things changed? Or had she simply been unwilling to realize that her husband had always been a weak man, driven by an ambitious mother? No, Caris said quietly, but firmly. I won't sign it. Jarvis's face contorted with anger. Caris, don't be stubborn. You realize you can't handle the restaurant. Mom wants to help you. Your mother wants to take what is mine. Caris felt her determination grow inside her. Eris believed in me. She knew what she was doing. Jarvis threw the papers on the bed. Eris was a selfish old woman. She used you all your life, first as a free assistant, then as emotional support, and now she's left you with a business you are guaranteed to fail at. Don't talk about her like that. Caris raised her voice to her husband for the first time. You know nothing about my relationship with her. I know my wife has been baking cupcakes in a tiny bakery for 6 years, barely making ends meet. Jarvis moved closer to her. Suddenly you have a restaurant worth millions? What do you think people will say? What will the Legacy Crown's customers think when they find out their favorite spot is now owned by a woman who has never run anything bigger than a sheet cake? Every word stung like a whip. Caris felt her confidence melting. Maybe Jarvis was right. Maybe she really couldn't handle it. I need time to think about this, she said, backing toward the door. There's no time, Caris. Jarvis grabbed the papers from the bed and followed her. Mom has already talked to the vendors. They're waiting for a decision. Either you let us help or... He didn't finish the sentence, but the threat hung in the air. Caris felt cornered. She had never been able to resist aggression, especially from those closest to her. All her life, she had been yielding, compromising, trying to please everyone. All right, she finally said, I'll sign, but on the condition that this is a temporary measure, a month, tops, and I want to be kept informed of every decision. The relief on Jarvis's face was almost palpable. Of course, darling, that's reasonable. He set the papers on the table and held out a pen. Caris took it slowly, feeling the heaviness. Eris's face flashed before her eyes, her confident smile, her words, believe in yourself, as I believe in you. At that moment, the phone rang. Caris flinched and dropped the pen. I'll get it, Jarvis said, clearly annoyed by the interruption. While he was on the phone, Caris looked at the documents. The power of attorney had been drafted by a lawyer, probably the same Fielding. It granted Tamsin total control of the restaurant without restrictions or deadlines. It wasn't a temporary measure. It was a transfer of power. Jarvis returned, his eyes blazing. It was Mom. She just spoke with the chef at the Crown. He's threatening to quit if management doesn't make a decision by tomorrow. We have to act now, Caris. She knew it was a lie. Bram, the chef, was loyal to Eris to the core. He would never threaten to quit, especially to Tamsin, whom he didn't even know. At that moment, something broke inside Caris. For 6 years, she had endured Jarvis's scorn for her work, Tamsin's condescending comments, their shared belief that she was nothing more than a nice housewife, allowed to play at her little business. No, she said, and this time there wasn't a shadow of doubt in her voice. What do you mean, no? Jarvis took a step toward her, his face contorted in rage. I am not signing those papers. The Legacy Crown belongs to me. Eris wanted me to have it, and I will not fail her. Oh, Caris! Jarvis slammed his fist on the table. You're going to ruin the restaurant. You're going to ruin a business that took 30 years to build. Maybe, she looked at him without fear, but it will be my choice and my responsibility. Jarvis's face turned purple with fury. He snatched up the papers and his phone. Fine. Since you've made your decision, I'll call my mother. She can handle this. Caris watched him dial the number, strangely calm. She knew she had just crossed a line, beyond which her marriage would never be the same, but somehow, That didn't scare her. Tamsin arrived 20 minutes later, as if she had been waiting for the call. She stormed into the house like a fury, not bothering to hide her irritation. "Caris," she began without a greeting. "Jarvis told me everything. I understand you're confused and emotional. Eris's death was a blow, but now is not the time for sentimental decisions." Caris looked at her mother-in-law in silence. For 6 years, she had tried to please this woman, to earn her approval. 6 years of pretending not to notice her manipulation and control over Jarvis. "I've made a decision, Tamsin," Caris said calmly. "I am going to run the restaurant myself." Tamsin let out a short, sharp laugh. "Honey, be realistic. You're a baker, not a businesswoman. The Legacy Crown is a complex machine with dozens of employees, vendors, a high-profile clientele. One wrong move, and everything will collapse. Is that what you want?" "No," Caris shook her head. "That's exactly why I won't give the restaurant to you." Tamsin turned pale, then red with anger. She turned to her son. "Explain to your wife that she is making a mistake." Jarvis looked confused, shifting his gaze from his mother to his wife. "Caris, please, let's be reasonable." "I am being reasonable," Caris retorted. "Eris entrusted the restaurant to me. I have a team that will help me figure it out. I can handle it." "A team?" Tamsin scoffed. "You mean those arrogant cooks and waiters? They won't obey you, Caris. They'll see you're incompetent and walk out." "I'm willing to take that risk." Caris turned to leave. "Stop!" Jarvis grabbed her arm. "You can't just walk away like that. We have to decide this now." Caris pulled her arm free. "There's nothing to decide. The restaurant is mine, and I will run it." Jarvis's face contorted with rage. He rushed to the table where the restaurant documents Caris had brought from the lawyer were sitting. "Enough!" He snatched the papers. "Since you can't make a sensible decision, I will do it for you." "What are you doing?" Caris tried to grab the papers, but Jarvis shoved her away. "What you should have done from the beginning." He turned to his mother. "Here, Mom. The restaurant is yours now. Do with it as you see fit." Tamsin smiled triumphantly, accepting the papers. "Smart boy. I always knew you'd make the right choice." Caris watched the scene, feeling something inside her finally tear apart. Her husband had just handed over her inheritance to his mother, without even asking for her consent. "You can't do that," she said. "These documents are in my name." "Marital property, dear." Tamsin patted her cheek. "Jarvis has as much right to the restaurant as you do, and he chose to entrust it to me. It's legal." Caris knew that wasn't true. An inheritance was not considered community property under Georgia state law, but it didn't matter. Now Tamsin had the papers, and she wasn't going to give them up. Caris looked at Jarvis, trying to see the man she had married, but before her stood a stranger with a hard, smug expression on his face. "You're going to regret this," she said quietly. "I don't think so," he shrugged. "You'll thank us in a month when you see how well the restaurant is doing under Mom's management." Caris silently picked up her purse and jacket. "Where are you going?" Jarvis asked, suddenly concerned. She turned to him with a slight smile. "To my bakery. I have a lot of orders tomorrow." Caris left the house, feeling strangely relieved. The Atlanta night air was cool and smelled of impending rain. She expected to feel crushed by grief or rage after her husband's betrayal. But instead, she only felt a serene determination. She had no desire to return home, where Jarvis and Tamsin were probably still celebrating their victory. She headed to the Sweet Dreams Bakery, the only place she always felt like herself. Sweet Dreams was located in a small shop on a quiet street near downtown. When she opened the door, the smell of vanilla and cinnamon enveloped her like the embrace of an old friend. Caris turned on the light and looked around her small kingdom. 4 tables, a dessert display, a compact kitchen behind a translucent partition. It didn't have the Legacy Crown's luxury, but it had something more important, the feeling of home. Caris took out her phone and dialed a number she rarely used, though it was always in her contacts. "Barclay Quinn," the lawyer answered after the 3rd ring. "Mr. Quinn, this is Caris Monroe. I apologize for calling so late." "Not at all, Ms. Monroe. Is something wrong?" She took a deep breath to gather her thoughts. "The restaurant deeds. My husband took them and gave them to his mother. They believe they have the right to—" "Just a moment." Barclay's voice became sharp as a blade. "You're saying your husband took the property deeds against your will?" "Yes. He said they were marital property." Barclay chuckled. "They are not. Inheritances are not considered marital property under Georgia law, unless specified in the will. But don't worry, Ms. Monroe. We have copies of all the documents, and the originals have already been registered. Whatever your husband and his mother do, they cannot change the title without your notarized signature. Caris felt the tension ease a little. So, I am still the legal owner of the restaurant? Of course. But if they try to act on your behalf without authorization, it could cause problems. I would recommend we meet tomorrow morning to discuss the next steps. Agreed, Caris said quietly. Mr. Quinn, Caris mentioned in her letter that not all documents and assets were handed over to me today. She wrote that there are details only you know. Silence fell on the phone. Yes, that's true, the lawyer finally said. Ms. Holloway anticipated complications. Let's discuss it tomorrow in my office at 8 o'clock in the morning, before the business day begins. I'll be there. That night, Caris slept on a small couch in the back room of the bakery. She turned off her phone. She didn't want to hear the calls from Jarvis, which would undoubtedly come when he discovered she hadn't returned home. She walked into Barclay Quinn's office at 8 o'clock in the morning with a paper bag full of still warm croissants. Baking them was a soothing ritual before an important meeting. Ah, Miss Monroe. Barclay rose from his desk to greet her. He was a tall, slender man with astute eyes behind elegant glasses. Please, sit down. Caris offered him a croissant, which he accepted gratefully. Incredible, he muttered, taking a bite. Now I understand why Aris held you in such high regard. Mr. Quinn, Caris got straight to the point. What exactly did Aris foresee, and what assets was she talking about in the letter? Barclay wiped his hands with a napkin and opened a desk drawer. Aris knew about her illness for over a year. During that time, she restructured the business. He pulled out a file. The Legacy Crown as a restaurant has several components. There is the building which you now own, there is the brand and reputation, but there are other assets arranged separately. He opened the file and began to list them. The wine cellar, valued at over $200,000, is a separate legal entity controlled by a trust. You are the sole beneficiary of that trust. The professional kitchen equipment is leased through another company, also controlled by you. The contracts with the main vendors are in the name of Aris Holloway and Associates, where you are listed as the signing partner. Caris listened with growing astonishment. Why such a complicated structure? Barclay smiled slightly. Aris was not only a talented restaurateur, but also a clever businesswoman. She created this structure to optimize taxes. But now it serves another purpose, to protect the restaurant's most valuable assets from potential wrongdoers. My husband and my mother-in-law, Caris nodded. I don't comment on clients' family relationships, Barclay replied diplomatically, but Aris wanted to make sure you were protected in any case. He slid another document toward her. It was a list of the Legacy Crown's key personnel with contact information. Aris had specifically mentioned Chef Bram Cassidy and manager Nita Price as people she fully trusted. Caris took the list, feeling a lump in her throat. Aris had thought of everything. She had protected her even in death. What do I do now? She wondered. Technically, you can claim the restaurant at any time, Barclay said. But perhaps it's worth waiting and seeing what your husband and his mother do. If they try to act on your behalf without the power of attorney, it would be fraud. Caris hesitated for a moment. Part of her wanted to go immediately to the restaurant and claim her rights, but the other part, the calmer, more calculating one, told her it was better to wait. I'll wait, she decided, but I want to meet with Bram and Nita. I need to know what's happening at the restaurant. After meeting with the lawyer, Caris returned to the bakery. She had to prepare for the opening and then find a way to contact the Legacy Crown staff without drawing the attention of Tamsin and Jarvis. The day passed with the usual worries, baking, serving customers, taking orders for the next week. The familiar routine was reassuring. Among the regular visitors to Sweet Dreams was the local mail carrier, Franklin, an older man with kind eyes and a lover of blueberry muffins. He often stopped by before finishing his route. Caris, dear, he greeted her as he entered the bakery toward dusk. One of your special muffins, please. While Franklin enjoyed the muffin, Caris asked casually, Franklin, do you deliver mail downtown? Isn't the Legacy Crown on your route? Sure is, he nodded. It's a lovely place. I'm sorry about Aris. Bless her memory. She was a great woman. Yes, Caris said quietly. Listen, I need to get a message to Chef Bram Cassidy. Is that possible? Franklin smiled slyly. For you, Caris, anything is possible, especially if the message comes with one of these muffins. An hour later, Caris received a brief message from Bram, relayed through Franklin. Jackson Bridge, 7 p.m. sharp. Exactly at 7 o'clock, she was on the bridge, watching the slow flow of the Chattahoochee River. The rain had stopped, but the air was damp and cool. Ms. Monroe, a deep voice made her turn. Before her stood a burly man in his mid-40s with short graying hair and piercing blue eyes. His hands, calloused and scarred by burns, betrayed years of work in the kitchen. Mr. Cassidy, Caris held out her hand. Thank you for meeting me. Call me Bram. He shook her hand firmly. Let's take a walk. I don't want us to be seen together. They walked slowly along the waterfront as Bram recounted the events of the last 24 hours. Your mother-in-law arrived this morning with your husband. She introduced herself as the new owner. She showed me some papers, but I didn't examine them. He shook his head. Aris warned me there might be a struggle for the restaurant after her death. She told Nita and me to only trust you. How did the staff react? Cautiously. Most of us have worked with Aris for years. We're not used to sudden changes, Bram said, frowning. But your mother-in-law didn't waste any time. The first thing she did was fire the sous chef Liam, saying he was costing the restaurant too much money. Liam has been with us for 10 years and knows the Crown's menu like the back of his hand. She can't just fire a man like that, Caris said indignantly. Technically, she offered him a severance package, but her tone left no doubt, Bram sighed. Then she announced cuts. She wants to halve the wine list, eliminate some specialties from the menu that she finds too expensive and pretentious. Caris felt anxiety growing inside her. And the table reservations with the regular customers? That's where Nita got nervous. She tried to explain that we have customers who reserve months in advance, that our reputation is built on stability. But Ms. Niles said a new business perspective was more important than old habits. They stopped by the parapet, looking down at the water. Bram turned to Caris. Aris trusted you, Ms. Monroe. She said you have a special gift for sensing what people need, not just to feed them, but to give them experiences, memories. That's rare. Caris smiled, embarrassed. I'm not sure I deserve such high praise. Aris didn't hand out compliments, Bram said firmly. If she thought you were a worthy successor, then you are. So what now? Caris asked. Tamsin, Ms. Niles, will continue changing the restaurant. How long will the staff hold out? Bram shrugged. It's hard to say. Some, like Liam, have already left. Others are waiting, watching. Nita is holding firm, though it's hard on her. And me? I'm too old and stubborn to change. But the legacy crown isn't just a job for many of us. It's the family Ares created, and we don't want to lose it. They exchanged contacts, and Bram promised to keep Caris updated. The next day, Caris met with Nita Price, an elegant woman in her 50s who had managed the legacy crown almost since its opening. They met at a small cafe away from downtown, and Nita recounted in detail what was happening at the restaurant. She's fired anyone who dares to contradict her, Nita said, nervously stirring her tea. She's slashed the wine list and eliminated some of the most expensive dishes from the menu. She replaced the seafood supplier with a dubious company owned by a friend of hers. Bram is furious. The quality of the food has gone down, but the prices are the same. And the customers? Caris asked. The regulars noticed the change. Some have already canceled their reservations. Yesterday, Judge Fitzgerald, who has dined there every Friday for 15 years, left without finishing his main course. He said it wasn't the crown he knew. Caris listened with growing alarm. The restaurant's reputation, which Aris had spent decades building, was crumbling before her eyes. And the contracts with the vendors, with the wine cellar that Barkley spoke about? Nita smiled for the first time in the meeting. That's interesting. Ms. Niles ordered the sale of half the wine collection to optimize assets. But when Edward, the sommelier, tried to access the cellar, it turned out he didn't have the right key. It seems the cellar isn't technically part of the restaurant. And how did Tamsin react? She threw a fit. She demanded immediate access to all assets, but Edward said he could only refer to the registered owner of the wine collection. Nita leaned closer. That's you, Ms. Monroe, as well as the right to sign most of the vendor contracts. Aris had it all planned. On the 6th day after the takeover, Caris received an unexpected visit. She was closing the bakery when the doorbell rang, and Jarvis walked in. He looked tired, with dark circles under his eyes. I finally found you. I wasn't hiding, she replied calmly, continuing to wipe down the tables. I've been here the whole time. You didn't answer your phone, you didn't come home. I'm sleeping on the couch in the back room. It's quite comfortable. Jarvis looked confused, as if he hadn't expected her to be so calm. Look, I understand you're upset, but we have to talk. Things have gotten complicated. Caris raised an eyebrow. Complicated? In what sense? The restaurant? There are problems there. Mom has made some changes, and not everyone is happy, especially that Chef Bram. He's sabotaging her orders. And Nita, the manager, keeps referring to a contract that supposedly can't be changed without your signature. Not supposedly, Caris pointed out. Yes, they require my signature. Jarvis ran a hand through his hair, nervous. Look, I know what my mother and I did wasn't right, but we had good intentions. And now we need your help. Talk to the staff and explain to them that Mom is acting on your behalf. But she's not. Caris looked him in the eye. I didn't authorize Tamsin to act on my behalf. She took the documents by force, and that gives her no legal right. A few days later, the situation at the restaurant reached a critical point. According to reports from Bram and Nita, Tamsin completely changed the menu, replacing gourmet dishes with simpler, cheaper ones. She fired 3 more employees, including a sommelier who dared to oppose her plans to sell off part of the wine collection. The regular customers began leaving one by one. The press started to notice the changes. A small article in the local paper asked what was happening to the once famous Legacy Crown restaurant. Caris remained calm. She continued working in her bakery, met with former Crown employees, and discussed potential actions with her lawyer, but she took no steps to stop Tamsin.